Hi everyone, I am Chris. This is Simply Classic, and today I have a free pattern for you. Woohoo! So all the measurements for the pattern are going to be listed down below. Also, as we go over pattern pieces, we will list them on the screen for you. I have made two versions of this. This is a bag. I'll show you the inspiration picture in just a moment, but hope you might recognize it already. But I did it in a couple of different sizes. Well, same size. This was my first version. I had a couple tweaks, and this is the version that we're making today. So it does have a crossbody strap, and the crossbody hooks are inside. You will see here the outline of them, but the actual connectors are inside the bag. We also have a little zipper keeper on this side, as you can see. And otherwise, it's a very minimalist bag. We do have these really cool handles. We have the black peeking through. You can see here on the sides. And then we have them kind of like the faux roll handle that we've done in the past. Faux rolled handle, only it's going in the opposite direction, so it's kind of neat. Inside, we have a nice zipper at the top. We put a zipper pocket on one side. We put a slip pocket on the other. I realized I forgot my key fob, but the good thing about these connectors being on the inside is that they can double as key fobs or hand sanitizer clips or whatever you may need, whatever you would like. It does have a false bottom. We'll go over how to do that. Binding is how you finish it. And as you can see from this binding, there are no stitches on it. You don't see any stitches. So we kind of have an unconventional way of finishing it, but I think in the end, it really makes the bag look sharper. So let's take a look at our inspiration bag. So this is it right here. And it is the tote, the Marc Jacobs tote, right? I mean, when you're as big as Marc Jacobs, you just have to call it the tote. It's an amazing bag. It's a big bag. There's a small, medium, and large version, and they specifically, the people who have asked me to do this, Miss Alexis and her mom, Stephanie, asked for the large version, so those are the measurements that I give you in the video for this large version. There is another video out there that is kind of similar. I'm going to link it below. There is another version of this bag where there's a French seam done on the sides instead of binding, and she does that really well in that video. So I kind of used her video as inspiration for some of the construction methods in this, but I'm going to direct you to hers if you want to do the French seam and do it all in one color. So free pattern, the Alexis bag, nice and big. Let's go ahead and go over pattern pieces and see how we put it together. Pattern pieces, pattern prep, and all that kind of good stuff. So the first thing that you want to cut is your crossbody strap. Now I went ahead and made it already. In keeping with the kind of minimalist feel, I did not finish it with grommets, or not grommets, with rivets. Instead, I sewed my strap ends down. So you're going to need, for hardware obviously on this, two swivel clasps and a strap adjuster. So that's going to be 4 inches by the length of your contrast, which is 55 inches faux. All right, now going down the line, we have 2 main pieces. This is our front and our back. I cut it from the main faux color. And then, so this is going to be 18 by 11.25. Your front and back stabilizer should be a Decovil light. And that's going to be 16.75 across by 10.25 tall. So we have it a little bit less, or a little bit more room on the sides, because this is where we're going to sew wrong sides together and put our binding. We don't want too much bulk there, or it's going to be tough to sew. So we have 2 of those, front and back. We have 2 side pieces. Our side pieces are 7 wide by 11 tall, and the stabilizer is Decovil Light. We have it 5 3/4 wide by 9 1/2 tall. And you're just going to center it, just like the front and the back. We have 2 of those. With our main color again, we have our handles. We're going to cut 4 of these. These are 16 3/4 inches long, side to side here, and 3 inches tall. I went ahead and drew a line down the center already and put some double-sided tape, 1/2 inch double-sided tape down the middle. So we have 4 of those. We also have what we're calling a zipper keeper, which is that little kind of accent on the side that the zipper tail goes under. And this is 2 by 7 of our main fabric. We have some crossbody strap connectors. These you can cut it 2 by 8 and then we'll cut it in half. Essentially, we're going to want 2 pieces that are going to end up being 1 by 4. We have our zipper placket pieces, and on the zipper placket you're going to cut it 17 1/2 inches long, like wide, and then it's going to be 4.25 inches tall. Now there's no kind of stabilizer on this at all. You're going to cut 2 in your main fabric, and you're also going to cut 2 in your lining fabric. Okay, and the lining, all the lining pieces get some kind of woven interfacing on the back. I'm using Woven Fuse 2. Okay, we have 2 contrast handle pieces. These are 47 inches long, and we're going to cut them 3.25 inches tall, or 3 1/4 inches tall. I drew a line down the center and put double-sided tape, 1/2 inch double-sided tape all the way down both pieces. We also have our binding. Our binding is 33 inches long by 2 inches tall. No kind of stabilizer, nothing on these. We got 2 of these. We have our side bottom accent pieces. These are 7 inches wide by 4 1/2 inches tall. And you'll see I cut out little squares out of the bottom. Those little squares are 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. Okay, 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. That's both of them. The stabilizer is a Decovil Light, and that is 5 3/4 inches wide by 3 1/2 inches tall. So we have our front and back accent pieces for the bottom. We have 2 of these. They're 18 inches long by 3.75 inches tall. The stabilizer is 16 3/4 inches long, so 16.75, and 2.75 inches tall. And you're going to put it right in the middle. And again, on these pieces, we have a little bit more room on the sides than we do the top and the bottom, and it's because we have to put the binding on. We have our zipper overlay, 9 inches wide by 2 inches tall, and we cut out a 1/2 inch box in the middle. We have our key fob, 1 1/2 inches wide here, and the length is about 12-13 inches. The slip pocket accent is 1 inch tall here, and then about 12 inches, 12-13 inches wide. Okay. The bottom piece. Now the bottom piece you're going to want to do in your accent. The length of it is 18 inches wide by 7 inches tall. On the back, you need to put Decovil Light. Do not put any Decovil Heavy. We're going to stabilize it more before we finish, but while sewing, we don't want anything too heavy at the bottom. Otherwise, when we try to sew our binding on, it's going to be impossible. However, I do want to put feet on this bag because the bag is so large. So I cut 3 pieces of Decovil Heavy. They are 3/4 of an inch wide by 5.75 tall. And then I measured in 1.5 inches from the Decovil over and drew a line. I went ahead and put the strip 5 3/4 inches this way long by 3/4 of an inch tall on the middle side of the line. So the line is right here, and I just line this up on the line. I did the same thing on the other side. Okay, it's in 1.5 inches from the Decovil. Then I'm going to want feet in the middle because it's a really big bottom. So I just found the center and then fused a piece of Decovil heavy on the center. We are going to put a false bottom in this bag. So on the first version, I took 2 pieces of Decovil heavy and fused them together. And honestly, I didn't really think it was stiff enough. So what I did for this is I took a piece of cardboard and cut the cardboard 6 by 17. So 17 wide, 6 tall. Then I took 2 pieces of Decovil heavy, same 17 wide by 6 tall, fused one to one side of the cardboard and the other to the other side of the cardboard. So now we have a nice stiff bottom for our false bottom, and it should lay in there nicely and fit well. Before we cover this and put it in the bag, we are going to slip it in the bag and make sure that everything fits okay. Sometimes, you know, the way we sew or cut, the measurements are off a little bit. So this is still thin enough that we can cut it with a rotocutter and a ruler or scissors or whatnot. But it's a lot stiffer with that cardboard in there. So, you know, we all get so many boxes in the mail these days. Go ahead and save those because you can use them from time to time. So let's talk about lining. For that false bottom, you're going to cut a piece of lining, and this is 18 inches wide by 13 inches tall. You're going to cut 2 sides. Now on your sides, you're going to cut them 6.7 inches wide by 14.25 tall. Now, we haven't done this yet, but we're going to have to cut little 1/2 inch squares out of this as well, just like we did of the bottom of the accent piece. Okay, so we'll do that together. We'll cut those squares so you can see how to do it. We have zipper pocket. We have 2 9x9 pieces. We have a slip pocket, which is 1 12x12 piece. And then we have our main lining. We cut that all as one piece. So this main lining is big, and the measurement on it is 33 inches wide by 17 3/4 inches tall. Okay. So of course this is the 17 3/4, and then the other way is the 33 inches. So what you're going to need, just kind of summarize all that, is you're going to need 1 roll of your main fabric. Assuming you're using a faux, it would be 1 18-inch roll. You're going to need 2 of your accent, and the reason why is because of your crossbody strap. So if you don't want a crossbody strap, you can probably get away with 1, but if you're going to do a crossbody, you're going to need 2. You're going to need a full yard of lining, and that would be the 60-inch by 36 inches. And then you can need a 1/2 yard of Decovil light. You're going to need a couple pieces of Decovil heavy, 6 by 17, so just kind of, you know, probably 8 inches of Decovil heavy by the width of the Decovil heavy. We're going to need 2 zippers, both of them number 5 zippers. The first one is going to be 27 inches for the top. Second one's going to be 9 inches for the inside pocket. Of course, we need 2 zipper pulls. We need 2 D-rings, 2 swivel clasps. I'm using 1 inch, a zipper end, 6 purse feet, 1/2 inch swivel clasp for our key fob, and then a strap adjuster. So I'm going to list all of these things below the video, and you can go ahead and make sure you have all your pieces cut, all your pieces fused, ready to go. Let's get sewing. Step 1 is going to be prepping our handles. So I went ahead and did that already for 3 of the main pieces and for both of the contrast pieces. I'm going to show you what we're going to do with one of these main pieces. We're going to do the same thing for all of them. I'm just going to peel the backing off the tape, and then you're going to fold the long edges into the center, and you want the long edges to touch. So you see how these are touching here in the center? You want to make sure that they touch. Sometimes, like when you do a crossbody strap, or if you're going to do a strap that folds again, you don't want them to touch. You want to leave a little bit of space so that it has room, the fabric has room to fold. But in this case, we're not folding, at least not yet. So we're going to just fold this into the line, put it right on the edge. And then turn it over and do the same thing here and just make sure they meet. Okay, so you can do that for all the handle pieces. Okay, once all of your edges are folded in, you're going to put double-sided tape on the back side of your main piece. Both of them. So this is the side with the folded edges facing up. Okay, I can see those folded edges. Then we're going to peel the backing off the tape and match up the short edge with one of the short edges on our contrast piece. We want to make sure we center this. The contrast piece we cut 3.25 inches wide, where the main piece we cut 3 inches wide. So we're going to have a slight, and I'm talking 1/8 of an inch, a very slight difference when we put these together, and we need to make sure we center it as best we can. Now, you know, it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. You don't need to measure or anything. You can pretty much eyeball it, and what you're going to see is just the black peeking through, and then when we sew it down, it's going to show even a little bit more. So we're going to put one on one end, and then we're going to flip this around, and we're going to put one on the other side. So again, center it, and then we're going to center it all the way up as far as this piece goes. And I'm not pulling on this, I'm just laying it down. So when you're done, you are going to have quite a bit of your contrast here showing. And this measures about 15 inches. Okay? And this is what this piece looks like. So we're going to set this aside, repeat the same thing for your other handle. So you have them both done. And then from here, we're going to take our main pieces and our main contrast pieces, which is the bottom of these main ones. We're going to put them right sides together. And at this point, because we have a solid, there's really no up or down. If you use a pattern, make sure you're putting it on the bottom. Go ahead and clip them both together. And then we are going to stitch these together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. From here, we're going to leave the seam allowance pointing towards the bottom of the bag, and we're going to flip this, and then we're going to top stitch. So this is what we have so far. Go ahead and mark your center at the top. You can either put a notch or use a fabric pen. And then from each, or to the right and left of this notch, we're going to measure 3 inches. And we're going to make a little mark. So 3 inches this way and 3 inches this way. Now this is where we're going to put our handles. So actually, let me go ahead and make that center mark at the bottom too, so I can make sure my handles line up and are not crooked. So measure 3 inches from each side. 3 and 3. So now take one of your handles and on the contrast part, we're going to go ahead and put some double-sided tape. And you want to only put about 12 inches worth. Don't go all the way. It's just enough to kind of hold it on. I'm just going right down the center. And this appears to be the right side of the handle because I don't see any fold. It's nice and pretty. So peel the backing off the tape, and we're going to align the short bottom edge with the bottom edge of our bag, and we're going to go all the way up to this top edge and just go ahead and press that down. Now make sure your handle is not twisted, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So you're putting the handle to the right of this 3-inch mark and to the left of this 3-inch mark. So between the mark and the side seam. Okay. So you can see this black peeking through a little bit. It's really pretty. So I'm going to change my thread, and now I'm going to stitch this on. I do want to mark where I'm going to turn though, so I make sure I turn in the same spot on both. So I'm going to measure 12 inches up, and I'm going to draw a line. And same thing on this one. And that's where we're going to turn. So I'll change my thread and we'll go ahead and stitch it on. Okay, I've changed my thread, so now we're going to stitch up, across, and then down the other side. And we're stitching 1/8 of an inch away from the main part of the handle. So that's what it looks like stitched. You can see that black peeking out. It's just so pretty. So I'm going to stitch this one and then the other side, do exactly the same thing, and then we'll continue. Okay, once you have those sewn on both sides, we need to finish this handle. So peel the main part of the handle back a little bit and go ahead and open up the seam. And you want to open it up about 1.5 inches down. From here, I'm going to turn this around, I'm going to cut triangles in. So I don't want to go quite to the fold. I'm just going to stay just on the inside of the fold, and I'm going to go all the way down to that 1.5 inches and just cut a triangle out of this. And if you've ever seen me do the faux roll handles, that's basically what we're going to do here. Same concept. So now that that's cut out, we're going to take this edge and we're going to bring it all the way to the center. So what it's going to do is taper in. And when you do that, you're always going to have these little bubbles because we're asking the fabric to turn and it doesn't want to turn. So just stick your scissors in wherever the bubbles are and clip, and then you'll be able to get that to lay flat. Okay, you're just giving it a little relief cut. So go ahead and stick this back down, and you can see now how that's tapered in. What we're going to do is we'll end up folding this and we'll end up stitching. So you want to make sure that, and you can kind of test it, you want to make sure that when you fold this, you've clipped enough so that you're not going to see the edge of that main handle underneath there. Okay. So I'm going to repeat for this side. And then we're going to cut our triangles. And then go ahead and bring these edges in. And then make our little relief cuts. Stick it back down. And now we have both of those tapered in. Now we want to sew the rest of this main fabric to the strap. But I know I'm not going to be able to get all the way to the edge here where I left off. So I'm going to make it purposeful, or look purposeful. But what I'm going to do is make another line 1/2 inch above this line, and then we'll stitch down across that 1/2 inch line and over. You could put a rivet here if you wanted to, but you know, I think the whole idea behind this bag is that it's kind of a minimal hardware, minimalist bag. So on the other bag that I did, I left it and I think it looks great. So I'm just going to mark that 1/2 inch. And then where we're going to start is just beyond this taper. So I'm going to start on the black. I'm just going to put like a little dot right here and a little dot right here. And you can see, I think, where those dots are. And that's essentially where we're going to start. We want, when we sew this part of the handle closed, that's where we're going to pick up from. Now, thread-wise, I have my main thread on the front, but yet I don't want the main thread color to be on the back of this. So I'm going to put my main thread color in my top thread, and I'm going to put the black in the bobbin thread. And then when we go to stitch this part, we're going to switch it all out to black. So let me just go ahead and make a couple of dots here as well. And again, it's just like right above where you start your taper. So let me switch my bobbin to black. And then of course when you stitch, you don't want to stitch it to your main part of your bag. So you're going to have to flip the main part of your bag down. So I'm going to start here. I'm not going to back stitch. I'm just going to pull my threads through. We'll go all the way around. I'm going to turn, make sure this top part of the bag's out of the way. And then turn one more time. And it looks like I could have gotten 1/2 a stitch closer, so let me fix that. And then come up this other side. And I'm going to stop at my dot. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Turn the bag. And then come on up. And stop at my dot. So just go ahead and pull the threads through so that your black thread is now on this side. We'll tie these off. And then I'm just going to pick this kind of part up here and tie them together, and then let that double-sided tape that's underneath there hold the knot. Okay, so I'm going to repeat for this side. So now that all those knots are tied, we need to go ahead and finish this handle. So to do that, we're going to fold it in half. I'm going to kind of start from the middle here, make sure my sides match up. Clip. And then when I get down to the where the main part of the handle is, I'm just going to keep pinching until I get down to where my stitches started or ended. That's where we're going to start. So I'm going to put one extra clip just down here a little bit further so that this will help stay closed. It'll just kind of help me out a little bit as I sew. Just to, we're not going to sew that far down. We're going to start exactly in that same hole where we stopped stitching from before. So go ahead and continue clipping. And before we continue, I'm going to switch my thread out to black so that I have black in the top thread and black in the bobbin thread. All right, I'm going to switch out my threads. And my threads are changed, so I'm going to go ahead and start over here on this side and stitch around. So I'm not going to I am going to backstitch just a little bit because black kind of hides the back stitching. You just can't see it that well. And I really want to make sure this stays well. And I think with a hand knot, it might come apart, because you've got a lot of force here on this. I'm going to make sure that the main part is, pushed in there really well. I certainly don't want to see that. I just want to see black. So go ahead and get it under. I'm going to take this clip off. Get right in that same stitch. I'm going to make sure this is the main part of the bag's in there really good. Now, because we didn't leave a space between our folds, the handle is not going to want to necessarily turn as easily as it would if you had left a space. So just make sure as you stitch this, your handle is nice and even as you can get it. I'm just taking my time, and now as I approach the other side, I'm going to make sure that the main part of that bag is in there really good. I don't want to see it. And I'm going to stitch down to the next, or where I stopped my stitching from before. And I'm doing just a couple stitches right there as a back stitch. Just enough to hold it down so that it does not come apart. Alright, so we have the front part of this bag done, or the back, whichever you prefer it to be. I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the other side, finish off the handle, and then we will move on. So I now have both my front and back pieces done. Everything's looking great. So I installed my purse feet, and the way I did that was I measured 1 3/4 inches over from the side and 1 3/4 inches from this side of the Decovil, not the main part of the bag, the actual Decovil. Made a mark and then went ahead and installed all the feet. Now, depending on what kind of feet you have is going to depend on, of course, how you install them. But I'm just going to, now that they're installed, I'm just going to go ahead and put some double-sided tape on here, which is going to help hold everything in place and also protect the lining. And then from here, we are going to clip the bottom to the main parts of the bag and stitch. So I'm going to start with my front. And at this point, you end up with a lot of bag. It's obviously a big bag. So you're going to have a lot of fabric you're dealing with here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and stitch this at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and of course I have black thread and black bobbin in. We're going to have the seam allowance pointing towards the bottom of the bag. We're going to flip this open and we're going to top stitch on the bottom piece. Once that's done, we're going to put the other side of the bag on the other side of the bottom. We're going to clip, and then we're going to do exactly the same thing. Stitch and then turn it and top stitch. I want to make sure my seam allowance is turned under, so I'm catching it underneath the bottom of the bag. So now that we have this done, we are going to set this big piece aside for just a minute and let's work on our zipper pocket. So grab your 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape and the lining and the main pieces of your zipper placket. We're also going to grab our 1/8 of an or our 1/2 inch double-sided tape. And we want to start by putting the double-sided tape on each short edge of each piece. Now you can mark from the side, from the short side, mark down 1 inch, because essentially what we're going to be doing is just folding this over a 1/2 inch. I can kind of feel the tape and use that as my guide, but you're welcome to mark that if you prefer. There's no problem with that. Turn these around and do the same thing on this side. And then we'll just cut these apart. And we are going to put one of the lining pieces and one of the main pieces aside for just a minute. On this main piece here, we're going to fold back, peel the backing off the tape, and fold both sides back that 1/2 inch. So 1/2 inch there. Half inch here. And then on the lining, we're only going to fold back one side. All right, set that aside for just a minute. Put my tape with it. And on our zipper, burn my edge here. We're going to form a right angle here at the teeth. Now you can mark across so you're doing it at the same point, but essentially I'm just going to open this up a little bit. I'm going to fold that zipper tape in half, and then I'm just going to place it right against the teeth and put a pin. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. What you want to make sure of is that your teeth are even. Okay, so when these are folded over, you can see that these teeth are even. So with the tail of the zipper going towards the back of the machine, I'm just going to tack this. Now you can hand tack it if you prefer. I just kind of go slow to make sure I don't eat my pin. My machine doesn't eat my pin. I just try to be careful here. Remove the pins. And there we have our zipper. So from here, we're going to take our pieces again. And we're going to put double-sided tape along one of the long edges of each one. Now, on your lining piece, this side here is not folded over yet, so I'm not going to bring it all the way to the edge. I'm going to stop about 1 inch away. So peel the backing off the tape of the main piece, take your zipper, and you're going to lay the angle here about 1/4 inch away from the edge of your zipper placket. And without pulling your zipper, you're just going to lay it down on top of that double-sided tape. Okay, and you can see here, it's just about 1/4 inch away. So now take the double-sided tape off of the back of the tape here. We're going to line this edge up with the edge on our main piece. So that way we can make sure they're even. Okay, so here at the edge it's nice and even, and we're going to lay the rest of this down. Again, making sure we're not pulling anything, we're just laying it down. And then when we get to the other edge, we're going to peel the backing off the tape. And we're going to fold this edge over. Doesn't matter how much it is, you just want to fold it so it meets this other edge so that they're even. If it's more than 1/2 inch, fine. If it's less than 1/2 inch, fine, no problem. You just, as long as they're even, you're good. So with the back of the tape facing up, I'm going to stitch, starting at this edge, 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way to the other side. Now, I do have a black zipper, but I have the main color that I'm working with, and the lining's kind of similar. So I am going to switch my thread, both the bobbin and the main thread, back to my main color. All right, my thread is changed, so we're going to go ahead and stitch. From here, open up your seam allowance. A little bit of oil that has leaked out of my machine. And I'm going to fold so that the wrong sides are together on the zipper placket. Now go ahead and cut your tail off here. before you do this. And you can certainly burn this edge. Okay, and I'm going to clip all the way down. And then from here, we're going to stitch from the right side. We're going to top stitch along the side of the zipper, and then we're going to close the ends by top stitching. And then we're just going to go ahead and just close this long edge here just to keep it together. Now right in here sometimes, because your zipper teeth are there, you've got some bulk. So a lot of times I just like to take a couple of hand stitches just to make sure I don't have any problems with my presser foot getting stuck. Just to kind of get past that and make sure that the stitches end up nice and even. Okay? I'm going to stop over here at this end. Close that short end, and then we're just going to kind of base this side here closed. From here, I'm going to take my other two pieces. I'm only going to fold over one edge of the main piece to start. One edge of the lining piece. Go ahead and put your 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape along the right side, about an inch away from the side you did not fold over yet. We're going to do the same thing, only when we put this main piece on, we have an edge to line up to. So we're going to line that edge up, and then just like we did on the lining for the other side, we're going to fold this edge over where our ends meet. So just make sure this is lined up. Right there looks good. I'm not pulling anything, I'm just laying it down. And then when I get to this edge over here, I'm going to peel the backing off the tape. and we're going to fold this edge over to meet the other main edge. Okay, just like that. You can see all those meet. So we're going to repeat with the lining, and then we're going to stitch it exactly the same way. I'm going to do that and come back. Once your zipper placket's done, go ahead and pull it apart. Mark the center. Do that on each panel. And then we're going to baste or sew the panels to the main bag. So let me get my bag out here. And I want the zipper to close to the left. So you're going to put these right sides together. And I'm going to have my zipper opening towards the left. So I'm going to clip this one to this side. And I'm going to clip the other one to the other. And when you sew these on, you want to sew them with about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Just enough to hold them on so that we can move on to the next step. Open up my bag. And I still have my main color thread in here. Again, you got a lot of bags, so just take your time with it. And your zipper placket's not going to go all the way to the end. You can see here, we've got some room. Okay, I'm going to turn this around and baste the other side on as well. Now, usually when I baste, I don't change my stitch length, but I just don't back stitch. And I'm usually taking a smaller seam allowance. A true basting stitch is a really long stitch. So we're going to set this aside. Let's go ahead and get our sides together. So take your main side pieces here and your bottoms. This is the zipper keeper, or what we're calling it. The little handle looking thing on the side that's going to hold that zipper tail down. Now, I'm matching the centers on this, and what I'm going to do is stitch 1/8 of an inch and then 3/8 of an inch on each side. So I'm going to use my edge guide here so I can make sure they're the same on both sides. So this is the 1/8 of an inch. And I'm going to move this over and we're going to stitch 3/8. And the reason that we're doing that is so in the back, it catches the very edge here of where the ends come together. I didn't want to leave that much of a gap without another line of stitching because we're going to stitch this on just like this. We're not folding it in half again or anything like that. Now, if you are wondering what thread color this is the Amon Strong Bond nylon, bonded nylon thread. It is color 3135. It's Tech 70, and I get it from Sunny Sewing Machines in Dallas. It really is interesting because on the spool it doesn't look like this color at all, but when you put it against this magenta it really blends well. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and clip our bottoms to our main panel. And of course the bottom is the edge with the 2 cutouts. So we're going to put the top edge against one of these pocket pieces. We're going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. We're going to make sure that the seam allowance is going towards the bottom of the bag. We're going to fold this over. I'm going to switch my thread because we're going to be stitching on the black, and then we'll go ahead and top stitch. So the sides are done. Well, the bottom's stitched on. They're not done, but we're getting there. I'm switching my thread once again. And from here, we're going to put our lining on. So take your lining pieces. I'm going to stack mine together. And I'm going to measure a 1/2 inch squares at the bottom of this. So just take a ruler. You're going to measure a 1/2 inch in and a 1/2 inch up and just draw lines like this. And do the same thing on this side. And then we're going to cut those little squares out. And cutting in squares is that easy. So depending on the size of your bag or the size of the bottom, sometimes you cut out 2 inch squares, sometimes it's 2 1/2, 1 1/2, whatever it may be, and you just measure and cut. Okay, so that was the same thing I did on these squares as well. So we're going to take one of our side pieces and one of our lining pieces, make sure that our squares at the bottom, or both at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and clip this at the top. this on both pieces. And then we're going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I do have my main color in again, as far as thread. So from here, you're going to turn. And we're just going to temporarily match up these bottoms with the clip. And go ahead and kind of push this down and fold it flat. Your main part of your bag is going to ever so slightly show on the back. And it's because we don't want our lining peeping up. So we're going to stitch this using we're going to top stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, because we want this to look like binding without actually using binding. So just make sure it's nice and flat. And you can use your seam guide here. Go ahead and back stitch a little bit and then top stitch, 1/2 inch. Okay, so now we have that nice wide seam allowance. So from here, we want to take our lining pieces and we're going to fold these squares right sides together, just like that. We'll put a clip and do the same thing on the other. Now I'm going to stitch these squares using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm just stitching a straight line. Just make sure my ends are lined up. And then from here, I'm just going to cut this seam allowance back to 1/8. On both sides. Okay, and see, that's going to give us a tiny little square here. You know, a tiny little edge. So we're going to do the same thing with the bottom. We're going to fold this in half and clip and stitch using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I will change my thread to black before I do that. But before I change my thread, I'm going to go ahead and turn this piece, top stitch it, and go ahead and square off my bottom edges. Okay, so now that I have my other side done and I have my little square sewn into my black bottom, I'm going to flip the lining ones out and just slide these black edges, the bottom edges, into where the lining is. Now, your lining is going to be smaller than your main fabric, okay? It's designed to be that way because when we sew this wrong sides together, we don't want any of that lining peeking through. So I'm going to clip this in a few places, and we're going to sew all of these sides together. So just down, you know, all the way around. And of course we have our lining, and you can see here on the back how the lining is slightly smaller. It's about 1/8 of an inch smaller on each side. Okay, I'll do that one in a minute. We're going to go ahead and sew this. Now, it really doesn't matter what color you sew with because it's going to be covered up when we put the binding on. And I'm going to sew it using, I can't really use 1/8 because this is 1/8 of an inch away. So I'm going to come closer to probably about 3/8, not quite 1/4, just to catch it beneath. as you come around this corner, you're going to have to maneuver it and just kind of turn this piece as you go. So now this is what our piece looks like. We are going to take our keeper and we are going to sew it onto the side of the bag. Now we're going to come down about 3 inches to do that. So I'm going to just mark that to make sure that they're even on both sides. Actually, I could do it this way. Okay, so now we need to go ahead and attach our D-rings. So I'm going to take my D-ring piece, or my strap connector piece. I'm going to put some double-sided tape down the center. And you can certainly draw a line and if you want to make sure you're exact, but this isn't going to matter as much if it's not perfect because nobody's going to see this part. We're just going to fold this in. I'm just going to make sure that the edges, the long edges meet. Okay, so it looks like this. And then we're going to cut this in half. So from here, take some double-sided tape and we are going to measure down 2.5 inches from one short edge. So I'm just going to put a line there. So 2.5. Take the double-sided tape and allow it to straddle that line that you drew. And then peel the backing off, take a D-ring, slide it on, and bring the short edge of the strap down to that line that you drew. Then take the other short edge and bring it up to the line. So your upper section is going to be bigger than your lower section. That's okay, that's what we want. You're then going to take another piece of double-sided tape and you're going to center it right on there, just like that. So I'm going to find the center of my side, which I've done and put a tiny little mark, and then I'm going to measure 2 inches down. And peel the backing off the tape and then put the top of the connector. So this part here, not the top of the ring, but the top of the connector, centered right there in the middle on that line. Okay, just like that. So the great thing about this is if you're not using it as a crossbody strap, by having it inside, you can hang your keys on it or your hand sanitizer or chapstick or whatever you may have. And it's inside, nice and secure. So we're going to stitch across, and we're just going to basically stitch a big square here. You want to make sure, obviously, that you have your main thread in, because we have our main color, obviously, on the strap connector and on the back. So I'm gonna, and you want to get as close as you can to your connector. So I'm going to come on in, and I'm not going to back stitch on this. am going to cover my hardware. I don't want that foot to scratch it. And then come down. And then come across. So in this case, we can pull our threads through to the back, which I'm going to do, but understand that you're going to see this on this side as well. So I'm probably going to tie these off and then pull them through with a needle so that you can't see them at all. So I'm going to make sure I'm in the same hole. Started in, and I am going to take one stitch this way, and then go ahead and pull this through. Tie them off. And then I'm going to take a needle, just a hand needle, thread my tails through, and go in one of these holes and just try to come out one of the holes on the sides here. And sometimes when I do this, I have to use pliers to help me pull this through. But once you do that, just kind of pull it tight, clip these ends. Do the same thing on this one. This time I'm going to try to come out this way. And I am trying to pierce my knot. Now, this is not a super sharp needle because it has a nice big eye. It's more like an upholstery needle, but it works. Okay, so there's a little knot right there, but you can't hardly even see it. You don't see any tails. And this is what the strap connector looks like from the right side. Okay, now so from here, let's go ahead and put this strap keeper on this side. And actually, I'm going to put it a little further down than originally thought because I don't want to necessarily put it over this strap connector. So I'm going to come down 4 inches. Make a mark on this side. Same thing on this side, 4 inches. And then I'm going to line this up underneath that 4-inch mark. And we're going to stitch it on. Here's our side piece, all completed. And I'm going to do, of course, not put a zipper keeper on this side, but I'm going to go ahead and baste the side, put my strap connector on, and then we'll move on. Both my sides are done. So I'm going to go ahead and set these aside for just a moment. And we're going to start working on our lining. So take your slip pocket piece. It's 12 by 12, so it's a perfect square. Just fold it in half. Clip the sides. And we are going to stitch up each side. You can use about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here. Do the old turning trick where you fold your seam allowance over your stitching. Stick your thumb inside the pocket and your other finger on the other side to hold that down, and then just go ahead and poke that out. Once you do, you can stick your point turner in there and just get that last little bit out. And you have a perfect corner without snipping anything. So you fold it in, go ahead and turn. And then just use that point turner to get that last little bit out. Okay, I'm going to baste this closed. Going to even this up because I cut it a little bit crooked. I'm going to iron that, and then we'll put the upper lining or the upper accent piece on. But in the meantime, we're going to take our pocket pieces. This is our slip pocket. We're going to put our zipper on top. We're going to put the wrong side of the zipper against the right side of the pocket, and we are going to stitch that on. Okay, go ahead and flip this so that the zipper tape is laying flat and your seam allowance is going down towards your pocket. And we're going to stitch that seam allowance down. Now take the zipper, place the wrong side of the zipper against the right side of the other pocket piece, and make sure your pocket pieces are aligned. And we're going to stitch and right at the end there I ran out of bobbin, so my next stitching is going to be with black thread. So I'm going to stick my black bobbin in and go ahead and top stitch just like we did on the other side. Top stitch that seam down. I'm I'm going to add my zipper pull. I'm going to go iron this and then we'll move on. Okay, we have the zipper pull on. We have our pocket nice and pressed. Go ahead and set your zipper pocket aside for just a minute and put double-sided tape on both sides, both long sides of your pocket accent piece. This is 1/4 inch double-sided tape. Peel the backing off one side and you're just going to center your pocket as best you can on that accent piece. Go ahead and pull the other side off and then just fold this over the top of the pocket. Okay, we're also going to take our key fob and we're going to put double-sided tape along one long side. We're going to peel that off and we are going to match the long side. So just go ahead and match them up best you can. This does not have to be perfect because we are going to cut some of this off after we stitch. So just go ahead and fold that over. Pinch it together. And then from here, go ahead and, if you haven't already stitched out your thread, you want your black thread in. Or contrast, whatever color you're using. And we are going to stitch 1/4 inch from this raw edge for the key fob. I am going to take this over to my table using my rotary cutter and ruler. Go ahead and trim this down to 1/8 inch. And then I'm going to go ahead and top stitch my accent piece. And I'm going to do it about 1/8 inch away from this raw edge here. Once you do that, you can go ahead and trim off these extra little bit here. Oops, sorry about that. And then you have a nice slip pocket. So I'm going to go ahead and trim off my key fob and then we'll finish that up. The key fob's been trimmed. I'm just going to put a 1/2 inch swivel clasp on one of these short edges. Go ahead and punch a hole. And then put a rivet. Okay, I'll go set that rivet in just a minute. I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to set our pocket aside, and we need to go ahead and put our zipper overlay on. So to do that, you're going to have to grab a great big huge lining piece. And I want to find the center of the shortest edges. Okay, when you can do your lining however you want. Obviously, you can add whatever kind of pocket you want, if you want credit card slots, whatever it may be. But keep in mind that our zipper placket is long for this bag because the bag is very wide. and it's going to come to the inside of the bag. So you need to make sure you need to have enough clearance here for that. And it's going to end up being about 4 inches. So you're going to want to measure down for the zipper overlay. 4 inches is probably okay. I'm probably going to do 4.5 just to kind of be safe. I don't want that zipper placket to impede me getting into the pockets at all. So I know that's a very deep pocket, or you have to come down quite a bit, but I think that's going to be the best thing. So go ahead and center a ruler, 4.5 inches. We're coming down. We're going to peel the backing off that tape. I usually just kind of give this a little pinch so it has a little indentation for just a moment while I set it. And I'm just going to make sure it's nice and straight. And then this side kind of usually ends up laying where it needs to be. So we're going to stitch around the outside of this rectangle to get it stitched on first. This is actually looking a little crooked to me. Let me kind of readjust here. Sometimes when you measure, it's one thing, but when you look at it, it doesn't look right. The naked eye is good, sometimes better than rulers, I think. All right, let's see. All right, I think we're good. So I'm going to stitch around the outside. I'm going to pull my threads through to the back so I can tie them off. So once I tie this off, I'm going to put a little piece of double-sided tape over the knot to hold it in place and hold it down and prevent it from coming undone. Then I'm going to cut the center out of this square. Just make sure when you cut, your scissor tip goes underneath your overlay. You don't want to cut your overlay. Do the same thing on this side. And this is a big lining piece, but let's give yourself plenty of space around you, which with cameras I don't have the luxury of, but that's okay. All right, so I'm just going to snip, snip, snip. Don't worry about trying to get it even with the overlay. You're just trying to make sure that the lining does not show through the front of the overlay piece. So I usually just snip and then pull this back. So from the back it looks a little chunky, what am I trying to say? It's not really a great cut, but that's okay, because from the front you would never know. So grab your zipper pocket. We're going to put some double-sided tape along the actual zipper tape. I put it right on the edge of the zipper tape, at the top and at the bottom. We're going to peel the backing off the tape. And I want to make sure that my zipper closes to the left. So I'm going to turn this around. And then I'm going to take my big lining piece and center the overlay on this zipper. You want to make sure you give yourself enough space too from side to stitch the zipper closed, or rather the pocket closed. Okay, so once it's centered, we're just going to stitch around the inside edge of this now. Make sure that your pocket's open in the back. Turn. I should take one more stitch. Turn. And turn again. I'm going to pull my thread through the back. Just want to make sure I start and stop in the same hole. And then we're going to tie these threads off. Once everything is done, I have my edges or my threads tied and just singed it. You're going to put the top part of the pocket down to the bottom, clip along the sides. And whenever you do your pockets this way, you know you're always going to have about 1 inch to 1.25 inches left over here at the bottom. Just go ahead and cut that off. And then turn your lining over to the right side. You're going to pull this edge back, just like this. And you're going to stitch down. Then you're going to turn, stitch over, and then up the other side. I'm going to go ahead and push my pocket out of the way, or my lining out of the way. And then as I turn, I'm going to fold my lining back, pull it away from the zipper. That way I can stitch up and back stitch. So here's what our zipper looks like from the back. And then from the front, we have a nice, neat zipper pocket. So we're going to work on the other side of the lining now. So just kind of turn it over, and from this side, we're going to attach the slip pocket. Now again, you're going to want to come down about 4.5 inches. So let me measure that. And I'm going to center the pocket. Now you can either put pins, or I like these so tight magnets. They will hold these pockets without any problems. You're just going to take the back part, slide it underneath. Take this top part, stick it on. And then because they're magnetic, I'm able to just keep them on my machine. And they don't go anywhere. They're always where I need them. And then your pocket is not going to move. They are so cool. So I'm going to divide this pocket in half because it is a big pocket. So I'm just going to take my air erase pen and in the center, draw a line down. Now, I have black thread in, and this is going to be the spot where you're going to see the black thread on the pink, because you've got black up here and you have obviously the pink down here. So you're you got to choose. So because I have a black zipper and because I have black accents, I'm okay with the black on the, these pockets seem crooked to me, sorry. I'm okay with the black on the lining. I don't know if it's my ruler or what. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to sew down, across, up, go over one stitch so I have a place for a rivet, come down, and then go back around. Turn and come over one stitch. And then turn and come down. Now I'm out of bobbin. So I'm going to replace my bobbin and then finish sewing this pocket up. And now we have the lining done, so we have this pocket coming up towards this side. This pocket's the same way because, I mean, it's hard with a zipper pocket to know, but your pocket itself is going, you know, down so that this is the top. So you have basically two short sides of your tops. So now take your main part of your bag, and we are going to put these right sides together. Okay, so I have my bag right side with my lining right side. I'm going to match up the centers. And come all the way to the edge. Now your lining, just like on your side pieces, is going to be slightly smaller than your main bag. So go ahead and clip. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Just flip this around, get my handle down in there. Match up my centers. Now you want to make sure you have your main thread color in. So I'm going to switch that out and we're going to come back and sew these seams. Okay, so we're going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to try not to hit the camera as I do this. Once you're done that one, go ahead and flip it and stitch the other side. So from here, we're going to flip the bag around, and I'm going to pull this away to do this so I have enough room. But you know what I'm doing. I'm just flipping it so the right side and the lining are out. Okay, and this is what I have. So here's the right side and, of course, the lining. What I'm going to do from here is flip this zipper placket down, and I want that to be the top of my bag right there. Now, if you do not have an industrial machine, this is going to be a little rough, this and the handles. So you may want to consider using a cotton canvas or something instead of a faux or a leather. Although leather would have a little bit different construction than this, but okay. So see how we wanted to make sure our slip pocket had plenty of room so that you can get things in and out even when the zipper placket was down. So we're going to do the same thing and clip the other side the same way. Okay, so I'm going to flip this over. And then from here, we're actually going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So we're basically top stitching the bag now. We're stitching our zipper placket down underneath. We're going to stitch a 1/2 inch just like we did on the side so that it looks like binding. We're just going to go all the way across. So I am, since this is kind of like the top stitch in the top of the bag, I'm going to use my edge guide. And you're going to have some hills and valleys here because of the bulk with the zipper placket, so you may have to use your pump jumper or protect your faux as you sew. Right here, as you go downhill, is where you have a danger of messing up your project. So just be aware as you come down this hill to go ahead and protect it. Okay, we're going to do the same thing and stitch the other side. Protect my project. And so now we have this top stitched at a 1/2 inch, and it kind of looks like binding. It's pretty cool. So we want to go ahead now and stitch our lining to our main part of our bag on the sides. And just like again I said on the sides, your lining is slightly smaller so that as we stitch this wrong sides together, we don't have any lining peeking out. So I'm just going to clip and then clip the other side as well. I'm also going to clip my zipper teeth out of the way. And then we are going to base this closed, so I'm going to use about 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And it really does not matter what color you use for thread, because this is going to be covered up with the binding. And we are going from main color to contrast color, back to main color, so don't worry too much about it. I'm going to baste the other side closed and then we'll come back. Okay, we're going to sew the sides on. So I sewed one side on already, and basically this is what we're going for, is we're going to do this wrong sides together. So on the inside of the bag, you can see here, we have the lining nice and tight, matching up. Everything looks nice and pretty. And then the right side, we have our seam allowance, or our raw edge. We're going to put binding on this, and we're going to do it in a kind of a little unconventional way, but it's going to look the best because I played around with it for a while, and yeah, that was my, you'll see when we get there. Anyway, okay, so to sew this on, what you're going to do is find the center of your side piece. You should have already found the center of your bottom when you put your feet on, but if you didn't, go ahead and find that now. Then you're going to match up the centers. You're going to put the lining side together. I'm not going to call it wrong side because it's the right side of the lining, but you're putting the lining side together, and you're going to put a couple of clips. Come up to this top edge. You're going to put it together. And of course, clip on down. Now, make sure that the side with the zipper keeper is on the side with the zipper tails, that you don't sew the wrong side on. If you do, it's not the end of the world. You can just, what I would do is just take this off and sew it on the other side. It's still going to be within the seam allowance. You're not going to see any holes. So it's not the end of the world, but it's easier, obviously, to do it right the first time. The seam allowances are not going to match here, okay? Your upper or your side piece, the accent is a little bit taller than the front. And that's on purpose because the inspiration bag had a difference there. And also, it's going to help with bulk. We want to keep the bulk down as much as possible. So this corner, because we took that little 1/2 inch square, should fit perfectly in the corner here, right in this edge. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and clip the other side. Starting here at the top, come on down. Okay, so with the side up, meaning we're going to start here at this top edge. So my side is going to be facing me. We're going to start here and we're going to stitch all the way around. You're going to see as we get to these corners, you're going to have to kind of maneuver the bag to get it, to kind of stand it up and twist it to get around these corners. The reason why we didn't put Decovil heavy in the bottom of this bag yet is because if we had done that, it would have been almost impossible to get around these corners. So that's why we're doing that false bottom instead. All right, so it doesn't matter what color threads you have here because you're going from, you know, main to contrast, back to main, and all this is going to be hidden by the binding. And you're going to want to stitch at about a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So as we approach this edge, we're going to come down as far as we can go. So I can't go any further. So now I'm going to shift my bag and stand it up as best I can and come around this curve. Just make sure you don't have any tucks in the bottom. And then you're going to stand it up a little more, come across the bottom. Go as far as you can go. And then now we're going to kind of lay it down in the other direction. I had to pull my placket, my zipper placket out of the way there. It was just kind of bumping the edge of the presser foot. So that got the sides sewn on. So now it is binding time. And we are going to attach this binding in a somewhat unconventional way for faux. But I've experimented with it, and this is the way, in my opinion, that looks the best. So you can do this however you want. If you've got a better way, please do not hesitate to reach out and post it on the Facebook group or post it down below, because we would love to hear how you would do it. So I want the back and the front of the bag to look the best with the binding. I want the sides to look good too, don't get me wrong, but let's face it, we want the front and the back to look the best. So I'm going to take my piece of binding and I'm going to leave myself a little tail, and I'm going to clip it with the raw edges together all along the side. You're just going to kind of curve around this curve here. Curve around the other edge. And then come on up. Now I have changed my thread back to my contrast color. Okay, and see I have about 1 inch of tail on each side. Now, this is you're gonna have some bulk here if you fold this over. It's gonna look the best if you do. The other thing you could possibly do is to just leave it, stitch it, whip stitch it closed, and then put some edge coat on it, some base coat and edge coat. I am going to go with trying to fold this over, and I'm going to go just slightly taller than my main bag, because as I fold this over, I do want I don't want to see any of the paint coming through. Cut my little threads. So once again, we're going to stitch from with the side facing up, because that's the easiest way to get around these curves. So I'm going to fold this over so that it's slightly taller than my main bag. I can see it when I look at it from here. You can see just a little bit peeking through. And we're going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around the bag. Now, you will be able to see your last stitch here. So make sure you get on the inside of that, because we don't want to see any stitches from the right side of the bag. And like I said, I've changed it to black now, or whatever your contrast color is. I am going to flip my zipper placket out of the way. You're not going to sew on it, but it's nice to get it out of the way just for bulk purposes. just like when I sewed the side on, I'm going to get as close as I can. And as you turn this, your binding is going to give a little, so you might have a little extra on the other side when you get there. Now I'm going to roll the bag towards me. As you get around the curve, just try to straighten it out as much as you can. And then as I get to the top over here, I'm going to move my zipper placket out of the way, and then I'm also going to take my tail here and fold it under so that I can see just a little bit of the black on top. Before we move on, I am going to cut back this seam allowance, and I'm going to cut it back to about 1/4 of an inch. So here's the binding on here. Okay, we got it all the way around, and I'm just going to cut back. We've got a lot of stitches in here where we stitched things on and basted things on, and so I'm just going to give this binding some room to fold over. And this is going to make this seam nice and even too. So as the binding does fold over, everything is lined up. All right, so from here, we're going to just go ahead and flip this binding up, okay? And we're going to fold it back on itself. So let me start about here. So what that means is I'm going to fold this edge over, and then I'm just going to fold it right over the bag. And I'm going to make sure that my stitches, all my stitches are hidden. When I get to the top, I do the same thing, fold and fold. And you may have to play with this top a little bit. Let's see. So whatever it takes to get it to look good. Now, when I did the first version of this, the first bag, my little tester over there, I thought about using some kind of glue on this to keep it down while I stitched it. and decided against it because I didn't want my needle to get sticky, and double-sided tape would have definitely done that. It's impossible to stitch with double-sided tape and a hand needle. And yes, we are hand stitching this. Now, you don't have to, but this is the best way that I could come up with that it looks good. And a lot of people would probably say, oh, you can't hand stitch faux. And it is a little tricky because it will, if you don't take a big enough stitch, the thread will come through. So you have to make sure you do, but it just looks so much better. So as you come around these curves, you're just going to kind of pop the curve out to get this to lay flat. Go ahead and put some clips, and then when you pop it back in, it'll lay nicely. But I do the curves last. So let me do this side first here. Pull it over. Pull it over. And then I'm going to just tuck this in. Poke this out to make sure it's nice, and then push it back in. All right, and we got our other side here. Kind of finagle with it. All right. So we're going to, using black thread, go ahead and take a hand stitch all the way around. So that way, with the binding, whether it's for the front or the back, you're not going to see any stitches at all. So you want a fairly skinny needle, but you want something with a big eye, because this nylon, bonded nylon thread is obviously thick. So you want it to be able to go through without shredding the thread. And I am going to use black to do this, and I'm going to use a single thread. All right. So go ahead and tie a knot. And I'm going to show you a couple of stitches, and then I will finish up. This takes a little bit of time. It's not terrible, but it is going to take you a little bit. So you want to hide your knot inside this binding. So I'm just going to kind of open this up, and I'm going to come through. And then fold it back down. I'm going to cut this just a little bit. I feel like I have a lot of bulk here. So as you do this, you want to kind of grab where your stitches are on the bag. Okay? And you don't, typically when you do this kind of stitch, you barely pick up any of your base fabric. You can't do that with this, because if you do, it's just going to come right through. Like if I pick up just a tiny little amount of the faux like this and pull it, see, it just breaks. It just comes right through. So you've got to pick up a larger amount so that does not happen. So I'm going to start here and kind of pick some up and try to, you know, somewhat go around my stitches. And right here it's thicker, so you may need to use some pliers. But see how big of a stitch I'm taking there? It's really large. it won't, the thread won't come through. And once I get through this thick section here, it'll come through no problem. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to take that thick section, I'm going to fold this back over, and then I'm going to come up, try to come up behind the binding, kind of on the back end, and then ride my needle right along this folded edge and come up along the folded edge towards the back. Okay, so you see that's the folded edge. Again, I'm taking a long stitch and I'm going in and then coming out, but trying to stay on the back side of this edge. And then when I do that, and I'll come back and do this top afterwards, but when I do that and pull this tight, you see it holds it down. So I'm just going to keep doing that. I'll do a few more. Trying to come deep down here, take a big stitch, come up through the faux binding along the fold line, come up the other side. And sometimes the longer needle you have, the easier it is. And then pull this tight. And then you can't even see that black thread there. Okay, so I'm going to continue along and I'm going to finish this whole binding, and then we will finish off the tops and go from there. Okay, two things. I switched to a longer needle and it is much easier. This is a John's James needle. I think it's number 7. Second thing, see how this is looking? You see like little teeny tiny tick marks, but to me that is not, doesn't detract from the bag at all. And then the other thing I'm going to show you is as you stitch these corners, you want to poke them out, kind of like this, to stitch, because otherwise you're not going to be able to get in that corner. So do that, go ahead, poke them out, take a nice long stitch. I'm going to do one more right around that corner. And then you can just push that corner back in and you're good to go there. Okay, so I'm going to continue on. So here we are at the top, and we have the, let's see if you can see that. I know that it's black, but it's, you can see the folds there. I'm going to take some stitches, and this is not uncommon in the top of bags. A lot of times you see these stitches done, and you can just see, you know, a series of 4 or 5 stitches, and it's not a big deal. I'm going to go from the front here of the bag through to the back, and I'm going to do that probably about 3 or 4 times, and just make sure all of the threads are in the same spot. And actually, if you go onto the Marc Jacobs site and you look at the bags that they kind of do a French seam on, they have like a little stitch like this at the top of the bag. Okay, so I've got it done. It is a little tighter. So I'm just going to go through those threads and do a little knot. Do it a couple times. Okay, and then instead of cutting this and burning it, I'm just going to take and feed this down through the lining. So you can see here how I'm coming out the lining. Just doesn't matter how far you go down, just go down far enough. Let me open this up and pull the needle out. So basically I'm just hiding the tail here. So I'm going to pull this down. And then I'm just going to pull it tight and snip it, and that thread will just get hidden right in there. Okay, and then we have a nice neat edge up there. So I'm going to go back and do the same thing with this side. Do those few stitches to get that edge nice and neat. I'm going to sew the binding on the other side, go ahead and hand stitch it on, and I mean just look close up at how nice that looks. It's nice and even on the inside. It's nice. I mean, yes, you might see, like I said, a couple little marks here and there where the thread's coming through, but it's not a big stitch. It's not a crooked stitch. I think it's just an ode to a hand stitch, right? It is a hand stitch, but just I think it looks good. Once you use this enough, you're not going to be able to tell. All right, so I'm going to do that, and then we're going to put this bottom in. We're in a zipper pull and stuff, and we're done. Binding is complete. The back is so big it barely fits in the camera. But it looks really great. I mean, it's awesome. Very good. So before we cover the bottom, I went ahead to make sure it fit. And I did have to cut it slightly. So when I stuck it in, the width, I had to cut about 1/4 inch. And then the length, I had to cut roughly it was really about between 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch. So, you know, I gave you a measurement to cut this so that that should be the largest it is, but double check it before we cover it, because, you know, the way we cut, the way we sew, it might be slightly different, and you want to make sure it fits before we cover it. So once you know that you have it correct, we are going to take our last piece, which is our lining piece, and we are going to turn it wrong side up. We're going to put some, now you can iron this or you can use some double-sided tape, whatever works best. I'm going to put some double-sided tape along this short edge. I'm going to peel that off. And fold it down about 1/2 inch. Okay, from here I'm going to, and the reason why we're going to do it this way is because everybody's might be a little bit different. So I'm going to go ahead and leave myself a little bit of space here to stitch, because I'm using cardboard here. I don't want to stitch through my cardboard, but I do want to be able to take a seam allowance there. I want to be able to stitch the ends closed. So I'm going to leave about 1/4 inch there, and then I'm going to mark on this side where that 1/4 inch is. So I know that I want to fold it right along this edge here. Now you can measure, certainly measure. Probably be better for me to measure. And that is right at 1/4 inch. So on this side, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put some 1/4 inch double-sided tape on the wrong side, and we're going to fold it on that line. So I'm going to find where that is. It's right there. And we ended up folding this side a little bit more. And that's okay. All right, so from here, we want to go ahead and see exactly where we need to stitch. So as I fold this in half, I can see that this is just about perfect for me to take a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so that will fit in there just perfectly. Now, if you had to cut your board more, then you might have to take a bigger stitch here. Okay. So all I'm going to do is clip this right sides together. And I'm going to take a 1/4 inch seam allowance . And I did change my thread out once again, be the last time. Alright, I took a good back stitch at the beginning and the end. And now we're going to turn this. And we want the seam to be in the back. So I'm going to take this to my iron and I'm going to press it so that the seam is, it doesn't have to be exactly in the back, but it needs to be roughly halfway. And then we'll continue. Okay, so now that it's pressed nice and flat and the seam's in the back, I'm going to go ahead and stitch one of these short ends closed. Go ahead and top stitch it closed. And I'm just using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, just a little bit. So from here, go ahead and slide your bottom in. Got a little more way to go. There we go. And then we are going to stitch this side closed as well. Now, you may, depending on how big of a seam allowance you left, you may need your zipper foot. I think I need my zipper foot. I feel like there's something over here that's preventing it from going all the way down. All right, let's see. I might be able to do this. Let's see. There we go. Perfect. Go ahead and place the bottom in. From here, I am going to put my zipper pull on, and go ahead and put my little zipper end on, and then we're going to take a look at the bag. All right, here it is. It's amazing. I love it. So we have a crossbody strap here that hooks to D-rings that are inside the bag. We have our little zipper keeper, and right now with the crossbody strap on, that zipper is kind of headed to the side a little bit, so you'd probably put it on the inside of your bag. But if you want to take this crossbody strap off, which I will do right now, the zipper keeper fits in. The zipper fits right in the keeper. I actually cut a little bit off of the zipper. I probably didn't have to. I think it would have been okay either way. See, that fits there. So a very minimalist bag, although we did add feet. And then of course we have our our zipper pocket. And when you open this up, it opens nice and wide, and you have an enormous bag on the inside. We put a slip pocket here, we put zipper pocket, and then of course our D-rings are on the inside, and those can double as, oh, I forgot my key fob. I just realized I forgot to put my key fob in. Oops. Okay, well, you have, you can hook your keys to here or the other side if you're not, or even if you are using a crossbody strap, you could probably use that as well. So I'm terrible about that. I don't know what it is. So we are going to call this the Alexis tote for the young lady that is headed to New York City for her big new adventure, and she asked her mom to make her a bag like this. So that's who this bag is inspired after, is Alexis. So Alexis, I hope you have a wonderful time. Again, free pattern. You can download and make this as many times as you want. All the measurements are included at the beginning of the video. If you have any questions, you know where to find me, chris@simplyclassic.net. Give me that thumbs up, give me a like. Anything like that helps me tremendously, and I would appreciate it. So until next time, everybody, happy sewing.